Remember likewise that psychic phenomena are no indication of a successful following of meditation. The world will see the effects and be a better judge than the student himself. Above all, the master will know, for the results on causal levels will be apparent to him, the master, long before the man himself is conscious of any progress. The individual who's seeking to break up glamour in his individual life, he should be mentally polarized by decision and effort, even if the emotional nature is for him, in any one life, the line of least resistance. Those working in group formation will have achieved a measure of mental focus, but for the purposes of the work to be done, they will focus themselves consciously and deliberately upon the emotional plane through their control of their natures. Workers must therefore have practiced meditation, have reflected much upon the nature of thought and its uses, and must be aware of the light within. So when these three stages have been established as related activities, as habits, and automatic reactions, and when the intention is fixed and the ability to focus has become an almost instinctual reaction, then sound and effective work can be done. To this work must be added persistence and patience. So we each need to do a kind of personal evaluation in the light of the soul, with guidance from our soul and master, with whom we identify and sense a connection. Have we established practice meditation? Have we established a deep reflection upon the nature of thought and the uses of thought? Have we developed awareness of the light within? Are these our habits? Are these our automatic reactions? And when this intention is fixed and we can focus, then we can move forward. But he goes on to tell us that it's not necessary to have achieved perfection in the process before starting this work and service. Disciples and aspirants must cultivate the consciousness of cooperation and realization that in service, such as is proposed in the dissipation of glamour and the dispelling of illusion, that they are definitely participating in an hierarchical activity. And we are therefore in a position to render help, even if we could not alone and unaided achieve the desired results. So we can hasten the process by our combined help. And as we've covered in other sessions, as we've looked at the relationships in relation to the new astrology, Master DK tells us, we do have someone coming from. Master DK tells us that, first of all, we all have flaws up until the fourth initiation. So that's a critical thing to remember. We all, and he goes on to say, we all must dissipate our individual glamours. And you can see that kind of embedded in this teaching that he gives us in Glamour, a World Problem. And if we have a group, and we have structured this group with those of us who have worked on glamour for decades in group formation, that we can assist those who are ready to take this next step and first dissipate individual glamour, learn the practice, and then begin to look at group glamour. So let us align on this second day of distribution the energies of the full moon of Pisces. Imagine yourself and all of the group gathered today on the golden path, surrounded on both sides by beautiful lotus blossoms. Using the creative imagination, create the reality of that in your mind to the point that you can sense the fragrance, see the beauty on this path that leads us to Master Dwell Cool's study. We are together. Acknowledge all who have joined us today. And we bring also the energies of the group, the core group that has developed the public dissemination of this recording that appears on YouTube. And we know that they are with us and that we are building a group field as we walk together towards the ivory door. We connected with the Master at the time of the full moon as a group, for he told us in Glamour, a World Problem, that we are to connect with him as a group at the time of each full moon. So on this day of distribution, let us see the door open and know the Master is greeting us and bringing us into his study. Breathe in effortlessly and easily. We walk through the entry. We are invited in for this contemplative approach to advancing as a discipleship group into the study and dissipation of glamour as individuals supported by this group and a much larger group subjectively. We stand around Master Dwell Cool and see the three windows filled with light. We stand in silence as he turns and faces the east. Together, we enter into this point of light. And as we do so, this beam of directed, focused light, revealing a greater light, illumining our way to the center of the light. This light and the Master directing our way. We each affirm, and we affirm as a group, I am one with my group brothers and sisters, and all that I have is theirs. May the love of the one soul pour forth to all. May the energy of the one soul lift and aid all. May the thoughts which the soul creates reach and encourage all. May the energy of the divine self be spread abroad in our hearts, through our groups, and throughout the world. In this unity, let us examine the individual formula and learn how to select the glamour to begin with as an individual. As the observer, assume the attitude of the soul, and from that high point, look back over a period of time on the screen of your mind as if you're watching the movie of your life. Or as the observer, the director of the life, watching the play as if you're in the balcony, you're looking onto the stage and you see an incident, an experience, a time played out. Notice a moment when an event or a recollection reveals some response that's always related to some feeling activity. It is when you are stopped or when you respond without thinking and you are now looking down at that from the high point of the soul. Maybe something that you've thought about more than once over time. Was there a feeling of self-pity? A feeling of not being liked or appreciated? Did you feel or think that someone was putting you in a box? Did you have a feeling of some upsetness? Could be anger or worry, over caring that is unselfish selfishness because it's based on your individual idea or need of how things should be or what someone should do. Was it a feeling of the need to control a situation? It doesn't make any difference if it was important or unimportant, that you had this response and you had not thought first of the consideration of the whole, of all those involved or those affected. Was it possibly the feeling or the need to be right about something, about a situation, without a true concern and true awareness of others? In any of these cases you recall or can see as the soul, it's with true mindfulness and it's in a truly detached manner. You can see the astral nature or the kama manasic, that is sort of the feeling mind nature of your response. It comes up, the kama manasic nature comes up particularly when one is justifying something that we've done from that individual perspective and not having considered the whole. You then see or recall the situation in the glamour. Give it the name you believe to be most appropriate. It really doesn't make any difference what anyone else might call it. It is your soul awareness of that glamour and your soul guidance to identify it in a way that makes sense for you. Now let's assume the attitude of the observer that we've practiced so many times as we move forward together. Envision your etheric body, your aura, which includes your health aura, that ovoid that surrounds your etheric physical body and reflects to the world as your health aura. Envision the next aura involved, your astral emotional aura. And finally, your mental aura. These three encapsulating your expressed etheric radiance and your place upon the path of evolution. These three together, your personality instrument. See the outline of these spheres, these auras, in a unity. Observe. As the soul. Now imagine that you can see the interconnections, the elemental on the physical level, and then the Devic streams, particularly the Devic streams with which we cooperate. The Devas on the same path, on the evolutionary path, who are with us. Flowing, relating, connecting these auras as a single unified field. And from the point of the soul, utter the words of Roberto Assagioli. I have a body. I am not my body. I have emotions. I am not my emotions. I have a mind. I am not my mind. Now lift the attention within this united sphere of the personality up to the highest point, the deepest point of life within our being, the soul. And through the words we will utter, we bring the soul into the auric field by saying, I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design. Sound a silent Om to affirm the presence of the soul integrating with the personality. So from this integrated point, we're going to begin looking at the preparatory stages in terms of selecting a glamour. Let us sound the protective formula, for we're meeting together as a group. And this is used in both the group approach and in Dissipating World Glamour. We use the sign of the cross of divinity, touching the forehead, the middle of the chest, the left eye, and the right eye. As the soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light, I work, and from that point, I never move. When we move on to group glamour, we'll be saying this as we, as the soul, we work in light, and darkness cannot touch us. We take our stand within the light. We work, and from that point, we never move. Both esoteric healing and the dissipation of glamour require soul focus. So it is important for us to realize at this juncture that there is a distinction. Both require discrimination and detachment. The art of the healer is concerned with the lifting of the downward focused eyes unto the soul. The lifting of what have been the downward focused eyes unto the soul, the healer within the form. Then the spiritual or third eye then directs the healing force, and all is well. And the healing is effective to the extent that there is development of the spiritual or third eye. And over a process of many years, some of you have worked with Nicole in developing that connection of the right eye and the left eye to the third eye, the spiritual eye, and using that not just as the screen of the mind, but using it as a function of the ajna center. Because in magnetic healing, the triangle of the head, heart, and ajna center is utilized. So there's this distinction we need to have, that that's a function of that particular formula that DK has given. And the emphasis is on the ajna center as the directing center, using the hands in front of the forehead in the radiatory healing technique. So this is something that many people are familiar with and use regularly. So what differs in terms of the dissipation of glamour? As those who are to become part of the second seed group of trained observers, and those who want to work on dissipating group and world glamours, it's essential that you understand this differentiation. For in the trained observers, we use the head, heart, and then the solar plexus triangle in the triangle. And the triple light of the soul is the light of the soul into the mind. And the mind has been linked, and a dual light of the light of matter, which is the brain, and the light of mind has been unified. So when the soul light shines into that dual light, it becomes a triple light. That triple light then is focused onto the astral plane. This is all done using the creative imagination, which has been elevated to the plane of mind. It is not functioning on the astral plane, and it has to be held there, and we'll go through that. And this is the important point, is using our creative imagination in a slightly different way. So this develops the searchlight, the triple light, which is then turned onto the astral plane and directed to the chosen glamour. This results in the dissipation of the fog, the cloud, the distortion, the glamour, eventually revealing the real. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, about why it's the astral plane. So what are some points of guidance? Always select a glamour that's truly present in your life. Know that it's limiting you, that it is standing in your way, and you recognize it. You realize it hindering your progress along the path of probation or path of initiation. Master DK tells us that we all have glamours, and these flaws are with us until the fourth initiation, when the etheric physical body and the soul vehicle at the causal body is actually destroyed at the fourth initiation. So there's a complete transformation, transition, all the transmutation has occurred. So when you notice what you believe to be a glamour in others, and if you're involved in any nation's politics or community politics, maybe it's your family, is your community, ask yourself first, what glamour or illusion is occurring to me in my mind? And instead of focusing on the other, where you see that glamour or illusion in your mind, go back to the soul focus and say, is that glamour something I need to focus on? How is it manifesting in my behavior? Because if you notice something in someone else, it's a reflection to you of something that you might want to look at. And look at with a pure detachment on your own part and true discrimination. For when we begin to work on group glamours, we have to have achieved that detachment. Then go back and review the list that begins know thyself. For that is what we are to achieve first. Make this a regular practice. Some people do it as part of their evening review, and it's essential for us to move on to work on group glamour. So we have to be able to stand in spiritual being and serve as the soul. Always remembering that we have many glamours. It takes time to dissipate them. People become frustrated because if you're really working on this, more appear. It's inevitable, but fear not. You are dedicated, you have the intention, you are in service of the soul and inevitably of humanity as a whole. In this Aquarian age, which we're told by Master DK, is an emotional sign. And we have laid out before us by Master DK the goal in the Aquarian age, in the next 1,000 to 2,000 years, to completely shift the focus of humanity off of the astral plane onto the mental plane and mental polarization. It doesn't mean that glamour and illusion will be gone. It means that we have a job to do. And by doing this work, you're indicating that you're ready to do it. So in recognizing the glamour to be dissipated, this, as we've just focused on, a willingness to cooperate with the soul in physical, and that is that concrete mind, brain activity of the integrated personality, astral, your own astral emotional readiness, and mental ways in order to aid in the more technical work. So ponder for yourself on the implications in this sentence. And if you notice as you do your evening review or you look for the glamours in your life, you will notice where your daily life is focused. And then make it a point to work on integrating that in the process of integrating the personality. And a recognition of the ways in which this glamour that you've identified affects the daily life and all of your relationships. Even in our study work together, one can all of a sudden notice when you hear something that's new to you, or that you say, oh, I didn't read that, I didn't study that. You can immediately trigger glamour in yourself about not good enough, when not, haven't I studied enough? There are these triggers that happen for all of us. It can happen in a work situation when someone challenges you. And if you're in a job that requires you work in group, the glamours will be present if you focus on not your feelings, but focus on the way it's impacting your life and your readiness to really achieve personality integration. You can create a little visualization for yourself as the observer that you do once a day, and it'll help you to recognize the glamours. So then the 3 stages of focusing that are involved in the actual technique are outlined on pages 208 to 210 in Glamour, a World Problem. And we're going to go through the high points of each of these. The first is the stage of focusing the light of the mind and the light of matter, the light that is the brain light, I call it, in the mental vehicle. So you're focusing, I like to focus on the 4th subplane of the mental plane, which is the plane of discrimination. And do this activity using the creative imagination. You want to lift up from the lower, the brain consciousness, and blend and fuse with the light of your mind. Just think about that. Lifting brain consciousness and blending and fusing it with the light of your mind. Then the stage of meditation, which in time brings about the fusion of the light of the matter, the brain consciousness, and the light of the mind, which you've unified, that dual light. And you bring it in relationship to the light of the soul upon the mental plane. And this does take time to develop this capacity. So just consider that the dual light that you have, that unification, fusion, and blending. And now from the highest point, you're bringing that soul light into a new unity, that triple light. And then the 3rd stage, where these 3 lights are realized to be one unified light. It is a searchlight. It's ready to be turned in the needed direction. And you'll notice over time as you do this, that this becomes almost instantaneous after years of or months of practice, so that it comes without, it's, as DK says, it becomes almost instinctual. He tells us in a treatise on white magic that this is only truly possible when a steady rapport has been established between the soul and the brain. The process involves the capacity of the brain to register what the soul is visioning and becoming aware of in the kingdom of the soul. It involves also a paralleling activity in the mind, for the aspirant must interpret the vision and utilize the concrete intelligent faculty for the wise adaptation of time and of form to the true expression of that which has been learned. He tells us it is by no means an easy thing to do, but the aspirant has eventually to learn to express himself in full consciousness in more than one way, and that simultaneously. He begins to learn a triple activity in this manner. This the old commentary expresses as follows. The solar orb shines forth in radiant splendor. Visualize the solar orb shining forth in radiant splendor. The illuminated mind reflects the solar glory. Imagine the soul light reflected in the light of your mind, blended with the light of the concrete mind. The lunar lore, or the personality, rises from the center to the summit and is transformed into a radiant sun of light. Eventually, when these three suns are one, Brahma breaks forth. A lighted world is born. The achievement of the fourth initiation for many of us will give us this experience. This literally means that when the soul, symbolized by the solar orb, the mind, and the light in the head, form one unit, the creative power of the solar angel can express itself in the three worlds and can construct a form through which its energy can actively express itself. The lunar orb is a symbolic way of expressing the solar plexus, which eventually must do two things. And it's one of the reasons why we do meditation 1 and 2, lifting the solar plexus to the heart and eventually to the light, the heart and the head, because that has to happen in order to blend and fuse the energies of the lower two centers of force and raise these fused energies, and so blending with the energies of the other and higher centers reach the head. That's the goal. And it is also why we must dissipate individual glamours and illusions. So there's a recognition of two aspects of preparedness: the alignment of the personality, so that the three aspects of the lower nature are seen as constituting one functioning personality, and an active integration in which the personality and the soul are seen also as a unit. This is done through the dedication of the personality to the soul and its acceptance by the soul. These two lines of thinking produce a field of magnetic thought. Consider what we're doing even now together. We are producing a field of magnetic thought and realization in which all the work is done. And this is one of the reasons why we formed this process as a subjective group supporting those who are ready to begin to work on individual glamour. DK says, all the above embodies a teaching and a theory. This has to be wrought out in the practical experiment and experience and conscious activity of the aspirant. So these first few months we focus on know thyself, proceed slowly and with caution, study effects, and cultivate the realization that eternity is long and that that which is slowly built up endures forever, and aim at regularity. So after the stages of preparation, there is a pause in which the whole man braces himself for the work to be done. From this profound preoccupation with the stage of soul contact and the initial preparation, he now focuses his attentive mind upon the glamour to be eradicated. This does not involve a consciousness of the glamour and its why and wherefore. This is very important because this shifts when we work on world glamour. It's a different technique, a different stage. For individual glamour, it does not involve a consciousness of the glamour and its why and wherefore. You just have to be able to identify it. It means a turning of the attention to the integrated soul personality, to the astral plane, and noticing where that particular glamour on the astral plane. Simple, it's a mind function, and the attention is not to be turned to the astral body of the aspirant seeking to do the work. It's pivotal that this is your ability to be able to use the mind to look at, to see the astral plane and not focus within your own spheres, that astral sphere. And if you've studied healing, you know why. It's because disease develops from the astral plane. And if you're focusing yourself on your astral body, you could do harm and damage to yourself. And there are actually those who are quite advanced who do turn their light onto the astral body of another initiate. And initiates have reported that in that experience, if they're unaware of the force that's being used, that they themselves can become ill. This distinction, actually in a group that I worked with in terms of the study of healing, there were 3 people in a group of 20 who actually turned the light onto one of the facilitators, and the facilitator did become ill. We really have to be clear about this distinction. He says this is a statement of major importance because in destroying the peculiar type of glamour with which he's concerned, the aspirant or disciple begins to destroy his own share in it, and that in him which gives him contact with the glamour. And at the same time, he's preparing himself for group service along the same line. And this will not prove an easy task. So let's just take a minute. I won't stop the recording, but I want you to just pause. Think about what we've reviewed. Are you clear on the stages of preparation? Maintaining the light as the triple light of the soul and the blended light of the concrete and higher mind. And then how you will select a glamour now, because you're looking at glamour in a different way with the light of the soul. So we will have out for you tomorrow a simple technique of light to use for individual dissipation. And we'll ask you to use that on the third day of distribution following the full moon each month for the next few months. And hopefully you'll use it more regularly. So if we were going to split this, as I did yesterday, part 1 from part 2, we would close at this point with the mantra of unification in our soul work with our brothers and sisters. Or a mantra, if you're using this with a group, choose a mantra that works for the group. For example, you might use the first stanza of the Great Invocation. Let the forces of light bring illumination to humanity. Let the spirit of peace be spread abroad. May people of goodwill everywhere meet in a spirit of cooperation. Let forgiveness on the part of all be a keynote at this time. Let the powers attend the efforts of the great ones. So let it be, and help us to do our part. Sound a silent Om. And I would like for you to get up, stretch. If you need to get a drink of water, just take a break. DK advises us that for most of us, 30 minutes of meditation is sufficient. And this process of orienting to glamour is quite demanding. So flex your body, relax. Even if it's just to turn your head from side to side. Hold the mind steady in the light without physical tension. The body needs to be relaxed. And now let's go forward together in what is part 2, if you listen to this on YouTube. And I've inserted this because I assumed that those who have joined us have already been part of the essential relations studies that we're doing to open to the new astrology. And some of you may not have. So let's understand the astral plane in a way that DK tells us in a treatise on white magic. The astral plane is the plane of illusion, of glamour, and of a distorted presentation of reality. The reason for this is that every individual in the world is busy working in astral matter. And the potency of human desire and of world desire produces that constant out-picturing and form building, which leads to the most concrete effects of astral matter. Individual desire, national desire, racial desire, and that is, we are the 5th subrace of the 5th root race. The desire of humanity as a whole. Humanity has a 4th ray governing. So we'll look at how the rays in the next section appear on the astral plane. Plus the instinctual desire of all the subhuman lives causes a constant changing and shifting of the substance of the plane. There is a building of the temporary forms, some of rare beauty and some of no beauty, and a vitalizing of the astral energy of its creator. So just contemplate that. The instinctual desire of all subhuman lives. And that includes the animal kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, and the mineral kingdom, are all in this constant change. And one can understand now why there is so much appearing in the astral field related to desire around the environment. And it depends a lot on the orientation of the environing conditions of where individuals and groups are living, the potential fear that emerges. So one might say, do I have a glamour, an individual glamour, that is about my fear about what's happening in the world in terms of the environment? And you can do a deep study of this, and glamours do emerge based on the field in which we're working. Glamours emerge for parents around their fears and worries about their own children. So give yourself time to consider what glamours are really affecting you right now. Add to these forms that persistent and steadily growing scenario we call the Akashic records, which concern the emotional history of the past. Add the activities of the discarnate lives which are passing through the astral plane, either out of or towards incarnation. How many of you have noted yourself in earlier time in your life, or noted someone did a reading for you, which was just it's an astral reading, where they see something that they formulate as part of what was and the emotional history of the past, or the activities of those who are not in incarnation currently. And you add the potent desire, purified and intelligent then, of all the superhuman lives, including those of the occult planetary hierarchy, and the sum total of forces present, and it is stupendous. It's one of the reasons why Master DK advises in one of his books to not use pictures or physical formulations of what the masters look like, because that is part of the Akashic records. And if we're focusing on the soul plane, those can be distractions and inhibit discrimination of an individual or a group actually having contact with that master. All play upon, around, and through every human being, and according to the caliber of his physical body and the condition of his centers will be his response. Through this illusory panorama, the aspirant has to make his way, finding the clue or thread which will lead him out of the maze, and holding fast to each tiny fragment of reality as it presents itself to him, learning to distinguish truth from glamour, the permanent from the impermanent, and the certainty from the unreal. We have studied this particular tabulation, if you've been part of the healing group, and it is from the healing volume 4 of A Treatise on the Seven Rays. These 7 major focal points of force, and each of them is expressive of one of the 7 ray energies, preeminently the determining life forces for the majority of men at this time. They work out into manifestation in a relatively simple manner. And I took out the disease column, and we're going to look at these one by one as astral forces and correlate them to what DK tells us about the astral presentation of the force from the different personality rays or astral rays. So first, he gives us the first ray on the astral plane. The origin is the head center. And if you're thinking about the constitution of man, the astral plane has 7 subdivisions that you're going to want to refer back to. I didn't want to clutter up our particular focus today with that. But in essence, the positive ways, or the force can be a positive on that highest aspect of that astral plane as sacrifice, dedication of the I, and that's where emotional idealism manifests on that highest of the astral plane. And the negative ways it manifests are as the dramatic I and as self-pity. First-rate people, he tells us, can overcome glamour with relative ease once they become aware of it as a personality limitation. But this doesn't excuse the rest of us who don't claim first ray, because if you go into the Glamour book, he does say that self-pity is a glamour of many second ray personalities and souls. And it does manifest on the astral plane as an astral force. The second ray on the astral plane, the origin is the heart center. And thus, again, I'll mention our focus on meditations 1 and 2 as pivotal to moving forward. It manifests in a positive way as soul love, as the astral motivation, as an astral force, and group love as an astral force. And the imagination is key. Personality is the negative side, and self-love. So second ray aspirants are usually fully aware of any glamour which may be seeking to hold them, because they have an innate faculty of clear perception. Their problems to allow in themselves their rapid response to the magnetic pull of the astral plane and its many and widespread glamours. So if you read the Glamour book and you looked at the list that DK gives and you checked off most of the glamours, it's very likely that you have a very strong second ray. If you could find yourself in all the most of the glamours that are listed. They are not so frequently responsive to a glamour as to all glamours in a relatively temporary manner, but one which is nevertheless exceedingly delaying in their progress. Because of their clear-sightedness, they add to this sensitivity to glamour an ability to suffer about it and to register their responsiveness as a sin and failure, and thus delay their liberation from it by a negative attitude of inferiority and distress. They will profit enormously from a constant use of the formula until the time comes when they are aware of the glamour or glamours, but are not touched by them. The third ray on the astral plane, the origin is the sacral center, the positives, parental love. Now, doesn't that fit? The creative activity of creation of a child, the creativity of the sacral center, and the positive parental love, which, as I mentioned earlier, can become a glamour if the parents are involved in over-identification with the child. Group life This occurs, this glamour over-identification with your group work, whatever, to the point of the exclusion of other groups. Clairvoyance is the sense. The negative sexual inherent in matter prevents oft the entrance of the true wisdom of the illumined mind. Third ray people are as susceptible to it as are those of the sixth ray, and their devious, twisting, planning minds, and the rapidity with which they can deceive themselves and seek often to deceive others, greatly hinders their work of clearing away glamour. Their pronounced tendency to be the victims of glamour is evidenced by the inability of the third ray aspirant and disciple to convey his meaning clearly by speech. He has guarded himself for many lives by devious formulations of thought and of ideas, and can seldom convey his meaning clearly. You'll notice the difference if there is a strong seventh ray. There may be the ability of speech, but if you look at highly developed, let's say, advanced corporate leaders or business leaders, or if you look at countries that have this strong third ray in the personality, you might notice this occurring. Fourth ray, from the emotional plane, the astral force is, the origin is the ajna center. And this is one of the areas that we really need to understand, that distinction again between the healing work and glamour work, dispelling illusions. Because for the fourth ray, the origin of the glamours and the astral force is the ajna center. The highest or the positive is mysticism. And it is why we try to work as occultists rather than as mystics, because there are many glamours in terms of mysticism and the mystical presentation of the teachings. Psychometry is the sense used, and the negatives are selfishness and dogmatism, which one would think would be the sixth ray. But in actuality, it is this fourth ray astral force. Fourth ray people are peculiarly prone to fall into glamour and thus to produce a condition which is one of extreme difficulty. DK says that he might define their problem by saying that they tend to bring their illusions down to the astral plane and there clothe them with glamour and have consequently a double problem upon their hands. They're faced with a unification of glamour and illusion. They are, however, the group of souls. These groups will eventually reveal the true nature of the intuition, and this will be the result of their illusory, glamorous fight in the world of appearances. Harmony through conflict. Very important to have an understanding of this, particularly in terms of, if you're working on the souls of nations and recognizing the personality of a nation and the soul of a nation with that strong fourth ray. Ireland comes to mind, that whole Celtic tradition. And the mysticism you see in the pictures, in the creations of the fourth ray, glorifying and then insisting to the point of a kind of dogmatism about the use of these, highly mysticized images. The fifth ray, origin, the throat center, the positives of the astral creativity, sensitivity, inspiration. And the sense is clairaudience. The lower psychism is the danger. Fifth ray people suffer the least from glamour, but are primarily the victims of illusion. And for them, the technique of the presence is all important because it brings in a factor which the true fifth ray person is apt to negate and refuse to admit, the fact of the higher self. He feels self-sufficient. They respond so easily and with such satisfaction to the power of thought. Pride in their mental competence is their besetting sin, and they are therefore set in their purposes and preoccupied with the world of the concrete and the intellectual. This is something that you might have experienced with those who are steeped in theosophy and have a strong fifth ray. It is to the extent that they can't respond outside of that power of thought, and can have great pride in their accomplishments in relation to the creativity it produces, the sensitivity they have, and the inspiration that they acquire through this. That it is on the factor is the merger of the three lights and then shining that light on the astral plane in order to eliminate that glamour of pride in their intellectual accomplishments. The sixth ray, the astral force, the origin is the solar plexus. And this is, the sixth ray is one that we're probably most familiar with, but also need to be very clear about how we approach glamour work. So the sixth ray personalities and those where the soul ray is the sixth, plus all of those rays who have a powerful sixth ray astral vehicle. These make the most effective workers in the group, which is what they usually remember, but they are subjected to one major difficulty, and it's a big one. In spite of aspiration and good intention, they are seldom aware of the glamours which control them. Let's repeat that sentence. They are seldom aware of the glamours which control them. It is exceedingly hard to induce the sixth ray aspirant to admit that he is held by a glamour, particularly when it is a glamour of spiritual connotation and of a very high order. In their case, the glamour is enhanced by the energy of devotion, which stiffens it and brings in a quality which makes it most difficult to penetrate. Their complete assurance proves a serious obstacle to clear-sighted work because that has all to go. That has all to go before the work of dissipation can be carried forward successfully. So the positives, that of right direction, the impulse to want to dissipate glamour or to achieve something, and their aspiration on the astral field is so clear and positive. And interestingly, there's no corresponding sense given for this particular subplane of the astral plane. But the negative is what will usually plague them. There's an emotionalism that actually can be by a sixth ray astral, strong astral and strong personality. The emotionalism comes out and they're not aware of it. When you know someone who has identified as with that strong emotionalism, and that all has to go, as DK says, in order for them to take on the role of being the group leaders who are very effective workers in the group. And he says in Glamour, a world problem, that in group work, you really need the second ray astral bodies to be working in the group in order to temper the emotionalism that comes through with the sixth ray. The seventh ray, emotional plane or astral force, the origin is the base of the spine. There is no or corresponding sense given. And this is one we need to be very alert to, because there are so many people, so many souls, seventh ray souls now entering into this new age. The seventh ray person is faced with the difficulty of being able to create exceedingly clear-cut thought forms. And the glamours, therefore, which control him, are precise and definite, and to him, all compelling. So if you find yourself, if you have a seventh ray personality particularly, you will have exceedingly clear-cut thought forms and glamours. And they are compelling. What drives many to study white magic, to study treatise on white magic first. And these thought forms rapidly crystallize. However, they die their own death. So if you can keep that focus, that astral force, focused on the higher, and develop the skills and abilities that we do develop in focusing on glamour, the triple mind, those glamours they will die their own death. The downside, and it is a big downside, any self-interest, anything that is purely selfish, and these are what is called by DK, the selfish selflessness, leads to black magic. And as Michael has told us and others have said, before the third initiation is passed, we are all, we can turn to that end, the material side. So those are the ways in which DK orients us to the rays on the astral plane. Well, before we go further, let's sound the protective formula. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So here's a summary of the actual technique. We've completed our stages of preparation. We've identified the glamour. Now, using the creative imagination and the breath, by an act of the creative imagination, we endeavor to see and hear the soul, the source of light and power in the three worlds, breathing out the Om silently, inaudibly into the mind of the attentive, waiting personality. There, the light and power of the soul is retained and held by the positive personality. For the negative attitude is not desirable. Then retaining the light and power of the soul on the mental plane, combined with the dual light of the personality, focused as we know on the mental plane, we see generating an intense light. This can be visualized as a searchlight of great brilliance and strength. It must be seen as a sphere of vivid, brilliant light, not yet radiating out or projecting outwards. And know that the searchlight will grow stronger and brighter, more vivid and brilliant over time. Now, when this act of visualization is deemed to be satisfactorily accomplished, holding the mind steady in the light, the searchlight growing, and we pause, and the aspirant focuses all the will he has behind the light held steady in the mind, thus created by the fusion of the three lights. And this is the stage spoken by Patanjali as the mind held steadily in the light, using the soul personality will. It is dynamic, but at this stage, quiescent. It is not magnetic. It is not radiatory. Now, having held that mind steady in the light, the triple light, dynamically powered by the soul personality will, now we bring the glamour that we've named into relationship with the searchlight of the mind through the power of thought. So we have, through our thought, brought the glamour and the searchlight into relationship. The glamour and its quality and the searchlight and its power are recognized to be as they are, and the effect or effects to be brought about by that relationship are then carefully thought out. This must not be done in such a way that the mind process, light, and power will strengthen the already powerful glamour. It must be done in such a way that at the close of the process, the glamour will be appreciably weakened and eventually dissipated. This is an important realization. Now, by an act of the soul personality will, turn on the searchlight of the soul, the threefold light. Visualize a broad, brilliant beam using the illuminated, discriminating, detached mind, focusing the triple light onto the astral plane. You have achieved the needed concentration, the realization, and the relationship. And through this act of the will, using the creative imagination, turning the searchlight, seeing this vivid beam of light stream forth and pierce the glamour. pouring forth from the illumined mind onto the astral plane. You must believe that this is so. Next comes an important and difficult phase of the work, in which the worker names the glamour and sees it in the process of dissipation. This aids the process by saying inaudibly, we are not going to say these statements out loud. From a point of tension, focused, immovable will, you say inaudibly, the power of the light prevents the appearance of the glamour, and you name it. The power of the light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting me. The power of the light destroys the life behind the glamour. Holding the mind steady in the light. Saying these 3 sentences constitutes an affirmation of power and of purpose, and must be enunciated at a point of tension, with the mind held in steadiness and with a positive orientation. Each of these statements is focused on a different aspect of the glamour. The third aspect, its appearance. The second aspect, its quality. And the first aspect, the life of the glamour on the astral plane. Now again, sound the sacred word inaudibly with intention to produce what is called in the occult parlance an act of penetration. When the light is then seen accomplishing 3 things. Hold the searchlight. Visualize it making a definite impact upon the glamour. Penetrating the glamour and being absorbed by it. Dissipating it slowly. As time elapses, the glamour will never again be so powerful and will eventually disappear altogether. Then the next step is the process of withdrawing, wherein the aspirant consciously and deliberately withdraws the beam of light. Reorient yourself upon the mental plane. sound a silent Om inaudibly. Master DK says, I would point out that glamour is never immediately dissipated. It is of too ancient an origin, but a persistent use of this formula will weaken the glamour, and slowly and inevitably it will vanish, and the man will walk free from that particular hindrance. This may seem like a very long formula, but I have purposely detailed it in as full a manner as possible, so the aspirant may clearly apprehend what he is intended to do. After due practice and a faithful following of the required conditions, the aspirant will follow it well nigh automatically, and all that he will then need will be the formula reduced to the following brief outline. The 4 preparatory stages. Recognition of the glamour to be dissipated, that we have focused on today. The stage of focusing the light of the personality, a dual light. We'll have a session in March where we'll go into greater detail about establishing this light of the soul personality, the dual light, which is the concrete and higher mind, unifying. And if you're thinking about that as something as a challenge for you, we will have a session on the essential relationship of the personality. So the next one is mind, the essential relationship with the mental body, and then the following one would be the essential relationship of the personality. The next preparatory stage is the stage of meditation and the recognition of the greater light. If you're not familiar with occult meditation, I would strongly recommend that you follow meditations 1 and 2 and become comfortable with those. The next stage of preparation is the unification of the dual light of matter and the light of the soul, creating thus the searchlight of the mind. And we will, I don't know for sure how we'll work this in, given all of the meetings that are planned. But we will begin considering how we approach group glamour at this point, which is really important. If you take the time to practice and really get comfortable before we approach group glamour. A process of alignment and of recognized integration is another step in the preparation, and a deliberate turning of the searchlight of the mind to the astral plane. So then we will move forward with greater detail in relation to the formula itself, which, if you've been doing the glamour work for many years, you may be at that point, as Master DK has said, where it's almost automatic. So the stages are soul activity and the retention of the light, the generating and visualizing of the searchlight, the evocation of the personality, soul personality will behind the searchlight of the mind. The generated unified light is turned upon the glamour by the power of thought, the naming of the glamour and the triple affirmation, statements of power related to each one of the aspects of that glamour, and the act of penetration, the process of withdrawal. And the formula then, when you begin to do group glamour, changes. And we will look at the differences as we go through this in order to be prepared to do group glamour together later in the year. So I will, we'll stay after if you want.